Today we're jumping into the story of someone who lived right at this incredible crossroads of art and science, poetry and pure mathematics, Ada Lovelace. Now, she wasn't just some 19th century countess. She was a true visionary who literally saw the future of technology way before it ever existed.
And this quote, "This is everything. This is the key to understanding her entire worldview." Just this one question she asked her mother tells you everything about a mind that just refused to see a line between imagination and cold, hard analysis. For Ada, they weren't opposites at all. Nope, they were partners, essential partners in discovery. And that philosophy, well, it would shape everything she did.
You see, to get Ada, you first have to get her parents, a total union of fire and ice. On one side, you have the most famous, most scandalous poet of the era, Lord Byron. And on the other, his brilliant wife, Annabella Milbank, who was such a gifted mathematician that Byron himself nicknamed her the Princess of Parallelograms. Ada was the only legitimate child of this, well, spectacularly failed marriage.
And that conflict, that clash between poetry and parallelograms, would pretty much define her entire childhood. Her parents separated just weeks after she was born, and Ada was raised by a mother who was on a mission.
Lady Byron was absolutely terrified that Ada would inherit the Byron blood, what she saw as this genetic tendency towards moral chaos and, well, insanity. So what was her antidote? A relentless, hardcore education in math and science. It wasn't just to make her smart. It was designed to suppress her nature. The belief was that the cold, hard truths of logic could lock away the wild, poetic beast of the Byron imagination.
But here's the thing. Her mother's plan kind of backfired. Ada's imagination wasn't snuffed out. It was just channeled. She didn't reject the logic her mother hammered into her. Instead, she fused it with her natural creativity. And what came out of that was her unique philosophy of poetical science, this idea that imagination is the key that unlocks the deeper truths of the universe, the kind of truths that pure calculation alone just can't see. And this unique way of thinking, it perfectly set her up for a fateful meeting that wouldn't just define her legacy, but would also plant the seeds of our entire digital age. So in 1833, a 17-year-old Ada is introduced to Charles Babbage, a famous Cambridge professor. He shows her a model of his calculating machine, the difference engine. And while most of London's high society saw a neat little curiosity, Ada, she saw the future. She understood its mathematical beauty, its conceptual power, so deeply that Babbage was just floored. He nicknamed her the Enchantress of Numbers. And this slide right here shows the massive conceptual jump Babbage made, a jump that Ada understood better than almost anyone. His first machine, the difference engine, was basically a super powerful one-trick pony, a calculator. But his next idea, the Analytical Engine, that was a whole different ballgame. It was a general-purpose, programmable computer. And this just shows you how revolutionary it was. The Analytical Engine had a store to hold numbers, what we'd now call memory or RAM. It had a mill to do the calculations, that's our CPU. And it got its instructions from punch cards, which is exactly how early computers got their input. I mean, think about it. Babbage had designed the basic architecture of a modern computer back in the 1830s. Incredible.
The thing is, the machine was never actually built, but Ada Lovelace made sure its ideas would live forever through a most famous work, a series of notes she added to an academic paper about the engine. This is Ada's most powerful metaphor. Okay, so the Jacquard loom was this machine that used punched cards to weave super complex patterns like flowers and leaves into fabric. Ada saw that the Analytical Engine was doing the exact same thing, but with algebra. And this is the key insight. She realized the machine wasn't just crunching numbers, it was manipulating symbols. And if it could manipulate mathematical symbols, well, it could manipulate any symbols.
And this is where her poetical science really just took off. She saw something that even Babbage himself hadn't totally grasped. This engine wasn't just for math. She wrote that if you could express the rules of musical harmony as symbols, the machine could literally compose music. This was the conceptual birth of digital media, over 100 years before it ever became a reality.
And then came her masterpiece, Note G. Tucked away in her analysis was this incredibly detailed plan for how the Analytical Engine could calculate a really complex sequence of numbers, known as Bernoulli numbers. This wasn't just a theory. It was a complete, step-by-step set of instructions. And today, it's widely considered the world's very first published computer program.
Now, this table might look a little complicated, but it's basically the blueprint of her program. It shows the precise, step-by-step logic, telling the machine where to find a number in its store, what operation to perform on it in the mill, and then where to put the result. This right here, this is the fundamental architecture of software, written down for the very first time.
And here's a wonderfully humanizing little detail. When people analyzed her program in Note G centuries later, they found a small error, a typo, really. A division operation had its variables flipped. Even though her logic was totally sound, this tiny mistake has become affectionately known as the first software bug in history.
But, her title as first programmer hasn't gone unchallenged. Over the years, a pretty fierce historical debate has actually popped up. So, the big question is, was she? And honestly, it kind of depends on how you define the word programmer.
On one hand, critics point out that Babbage himself had scribbled down some earlier unpublished bits of programs, and that he gave her the core mathematical formulas for her note. Some have even dismissed her as just a scribe. But on the other hand, her defenders argue that while Babbage had the raw formulas, the letters between them show she was the one who actually translated them into the detailed, operational logic the machine would need. The modern thinking is this: while Babbage invented the hardware, Ada Lovelace was the first to publish a truly complex program. And, even more importantly, she was the first to grasp the conceptual power of computing that went way beyond just crunching numbers.
Her moment of genius, though, was followed by personal tragedy. Her later life was a storm of debt and illness, and her groundbreaking work pretty much fell into obscurity for 100 years.
It's just this incredible journey, from being almost completely forgotten to becoming a modern icon. Her visionary notes were published in 1843, then largely ignored for a century. Then, in 1953, they were rediscovered. Fast forward to 1979, and the U.S. Department of Defense names its powerful new programming language, Ada, in her honor. And since 2009, Ada Lovelace Day has been celebrated to inspire women in science, turning her into the icon she is today.
Her life came to this incredibly poignant and really symbolic end. She died of cancer at 36, the exact same age as the father she never even knew. And in her final act, she defied her mother's lifelong project to erase the Byron blood from her veins. She chose to be buried right next to Lord Byron, reuniting the poet and the princess of parallelograms in her own way.
But maybe her most lasting legacy is actually an idea. Back in 1843, she wrote this, a statement now known as Lady Lovelace's Objection. She argued that a machine could only ever do what humans explicitly programmed it to do. It could follow rules perfectly, but it could never truly create or originate a thought on its own.
And that, of course, brings us right to today. In an age where AI can compose music, create art, and write poetry, literally fulfilling the very prophecies she made, we're now forced to confront her 180-year-old objection. Can a machine truly originate anything new, or is it just weaving more and more complex algebraic patterns that we taught it? In the age of generative AI, was she right?